Good afternoon, good morning, good night. We're here from Shanghai, a small group of researchers, creative minds in our field. Professor Kenneth Field is joining from Beijing, and it's an honor that we could bring the edition of Consciousness Reframed 2024 to this gathering, or hybrid gathering in person in China and telematically all over the world. And to start with a welcome speech, the opening keynote, I invite Kenneth, who is the one who brought Consciousness Reframed to China, to Asia back in 2004. So this is framed as a celebration keynote, honoring this 20 years of legacy we have from an effort to bridge East and West. Welcome, Kenneth.
Thank you. I think I see some people who were actually here in Beijing 20 years ago. Margaret might have been here. Anyway, this is me 20 years ago, heading up the stairway. This is the Red Gate Gallery. This is one of the few still standing gates of the old city wall around Beijing. 20 years ago, 2004, I co-organized with Roy the Consciousness Reframed Conference, the Planetary Collegium 6 International Research Conference. The theme was Qi and Complexity, Qi he Fuzha. It was the first international media conference in China, and as such, it was truly a remarkable historical event. There were 4 early media arts programs in the city collaborating to host the conference. It was the Department of Digital Art and Design at Beida, Digital Media Studio at CAiiA, the China Electronic Music Center at the Conservatory, and the Institute of Digital Art and Design at Beijing Normal University. And the Red Gate Gallery. Here you can see Roy on his throne on the top left, and up there's the Summer Palace, there's Victoria, and there's Claudia. And the third one, I think the 4th picture is at the CAiiA, and the 5th picture is at the Red Gate Gallery. The conference proceedings was almost 500 pages. There were 64 papers and over 100 artist scientist attendees. The topics were cutting edge, ranging far and wide, literally from east to west. Myself, I'm a composer who has always speculated about what went far beyond my own field of expertise, electronic music, liberally trespassing into fields far afield. So as I reviewed the proceedings of 2004, I was struck again by the mission of this regathering in general, to be the primary venue for such artistic conceptual speculation. Take this to mean that I have always been entribed or entrained with this particular community. But to be honest, I've always very much appreciated the decidedly great artistic distance from the professional sciences and philosophy that I enjoy. I do believe that there is a place in the sun, unapologetically so, for this kind of serious, unrestrained artistic speculation. So, Qi and complexity theory. There was diverse speculation about Qi, conceived maybe as material energy or more difficult to frame as non-material stuff. Whatever the substance essence, there must certainly be processes of complex configurations of energies involved. Indeed, there's a corresponding concept of Li in Chinese, which holds that there is no energy that is not patterned. As Wang Fuzhi wrote 400 years ago, following Zhang Zai, born 1,000 years ago, patterning moves within qi. There's nothing that is not constituted by qi, so there is also nothing that does not have pattern. So qi does, in Chinese philosophy, function as emergent organizations of energy, qi zhi li, like complexity theory. Such patterning is all the result of the movement of yin-yang polarities, creating constructive and destructive resonances within fields and spanning different orders of magnitudes. As a preference, I was recently struck by the phrase, a curious reader of the literature. That's me, when it comes to subjects related to consciousness studies, quantum physics, cognitive science, Chinese and Western metaphysics, cosmology, and more. So this talk has a warning label. I am now and I've always been just a curious reader of the literature. So in 2004, I went full on in combining my interest in complex systems, theoretical biology, semiotic systems, cosmology, and self-organizing mapping methods. In the paper I wrote for that conference called "The Map is the Territory," I also touched on computational ontology, autopoietic systems, artificial life, the epistemic gap interactionism, phenotypic transformation, the semantic web, the semiosphere, remote sensing ecology, and not last and not least, the architectonics of the conceptual realm. My point in that paper being that representation is second nature. Representation is the realm of the virtual, and as such, it's the very territory of media arts and technology. And these mediational tools tend to transcend their representational function, acquiring their own ontological status as first-order objects of concern, and thus they become the territory. That was then, and this is now. As a musician, my expertise is in sound, the sonic, electronic music and its technology, coding, synthesis, listening, organized sound, but my expertise has never slowed me down. Since 2004, I have not been speculatively idle. I conceived and transferred myself to a new discipline called phonosophy. I only play music with people who are not on the same continent as I am, network music, and have developed software to facilitate this. I've recently joined a new institute at the Chinese Academy of Sciences called the School of Science for Human Habitat, because I place the sonosphere among all the other spheres of Gaian science, the heliosphere, geosphere, biosphere, technosphere, and the noosphere. So with the background, let us begin to enframe the current framing. Think globalization and technological accelerationism based on digital technologies which lead to a homogeneous relation between humanity and technics. A reframing of this enframing would point to the transformation of the essence of technological thinking. Towards this purpose, CAiiA suggests that it's urgent to develop localized conceptual approaches or practices toward a techno-diversity, basing this upon traditional metaphysical categories in order to adopt digital technologies without being merely synchronized into the homogeneous global and generic episteme. And I would agree, if only art and philosophy alone were the drivers of epistemological changes, this would be the Tao, the way to go. But economics, the military, politics, and public opinion are also powerful influences in the progression and desire for techne. So in thinking about traditional metaphysical categories, I had assumed that metaphysics itself was something universal. So where is Chinese metaphysics? Chinese philosophy is non-dualistic, so doesn't place things and meta things in stark opposition, as Western philosophy has since the earliest of times, like gods or Platonic realms or science itself. The Chinese tradition doesn't ponder the question of extrinsicality beyond physics or nature, but is more relational or contextually minded. There is the Tao, difficult to place, but something not beyond or prior to this world in the intuitive. There is Tian, but we have Christian translators to thank for its translation as heaven, as something opposite to earthly existence. The I Ching represents this polarity as Chen and Kun, and all change happens in between this Chen and Kun, while change itself is just the fluctuation of yin yang, which is the very definition of the Tao. Tao exists as boundless form, Xing, while Qi is bounded form. Notice here I switched to this other very important concept of Qi, translated as techne or tool or function. So in most of the rest of this talk, we'll be considering this Qi. Tao and Qi are inseparable. There is no beyond form, no metaphysics. This is just boundless and bounded form, or manifest and unmanifest. Anyway, Xing Er Shangxue, as translation of the Western concept of metaphysics, is problematic in the first place. It's more problematic when reciprocally applied in translating Xing Er Shangxue back as metaphysics. A Chinese metaphysics would be better conceived in terms of a genealogical cosmology, in which the actors and dynamics are entirely immanent. It's a monistic cosmology rather than dualistic. Cosmogenesis is not looked upon as creation ex nihilo, or a god or nothing, from a god or nothing, but continuously generative. The ontological perspective would be one of relationality rather than substantiality. So Chinese philosophy could be thought of as an ars contextus. As such, rather than forms and metaforms, there is primarily formation and transformation. The concept of ziran captures the idea of a nature in process of continuously generative becoming, autopoetic or self-neverthelessing. The West has dialectics and cybernetics. The East has yin-yang and Huanliu theory. Huanliu, circular spherical flow, is a way to stage the complexity of yin-yang interactions, leading to a ceaseless process of becoming. Overall, the concept of ziran emerges with an operating system again based on yin-yang polarity. Polarity is a term that embodies a rich garden of relational dynamics beyond the binary logic. It can mean mutuality, interdependence, resonance, complementarity, transformation, and more. Maybe a better inframing of Chinese metaphysics then, or Xing Er Shangxue, should just be third order cybernetics. Yin-yang theory is the operating system of the I Ching, or Book of Changes. The I Ching can be thought of as a timeless technology where the Tao could be manifest. My own recent project is working on a version of the I Ching called the Book of Sound Changes, Sheng I Ching, where I use the I Ching as a change matrix to stage the entire spectrum of sonic transformation. It would be a neat characterization to say that morphology, from a Western point of view, is focused more on the categories of form, while the I Ching system is focused more on the categories of transforms. Without going into great detail, I'll just point out that Pierre Schaeffer, who's known for developing musique concrète and advancing the practice of electroacoustic music, created an all-encompassing typology of sound objects. He broke that down into 28 categories, like a periodic table of sonic elements. This has been the accepted theory of organized sound since the mid-20th century. Coincidentally, the I Ching hexagram system also breaks down into 28 categories to describe an all-encompassing typology, if you will, of change or potential transformation. 28 complementary pairs of hexagrams equals 56, in addition to 4 master pairs, 4 primary archetypes that make the sum total of 64 hexagrams. My aim then is to experiment with the conceptual morphological correspondences between the two systems, to retromap the I Ching's categories back onto the spectral morphological system to complement the conclusions to date of modern Western musicology. For those of you who don't follow closely the rocket science of electroacousticological symbolical representation, here are a few examples of its hieroglyphic system. These are some general categories, individual sound objects and their graphic representation. This is Ake Pomerud's piece, The Invisible Object, that shows the detail of such sound events in time. Here we see one example of a potential correlation between a hexagram, cui, clustering, and the spectral morphological graphic of bulging. Now, the I Ching hexagrams consist of mirrored pairs of complementary oppositional concepts. In the traditional sequence of the Book of Changes, the ordering is indeed by such pairs. So the structure is really 32 conceptually paired or complementary polarities rather than 64 freestanding hexagrams. In the Shengyi Jing, one reads hexagrams sideways as a bilateral force, left-right, symmetrically mirrored pairs. This is a big perspectival reframing, moving away from the above and below or superior and inferior perspectives. But dynamic becomes more obviously complementary, correlative as sonic dyads. As an arbitrary example of one of these sonic correlative fields, hexagrams 2526, Wang and Da Chu, conceptualize the resonant state of low or high entangled wave fields, so entanglement. But the situation doesn't simply describe a physical objective behavior of constructive or destructive wave interference patterns. In this situation of non or turbulent entanglement, because there's a poetic intention also. An aesthetic consciousness is involved, the consciousness of the observer being an active field. Remember, the I Ching is a tool, one of subtle techne. This was an early version of virtual reality. Countless generations have immersed in this matrix. Countless individuals have dwelt in the very space of Wu Wang and Da Chu. Think of it as an ancient hotel along a well-traveled route, still standing. However, now we're wiring the I Ching as a sonosphere. We're putting sound into the old vessel and rendering the ancient images as sonic transforms. The I Ching has the potential of a Chinese cymoscope, as in cymatics. We put a droplet of color into one of the chambers and turned it on to see what previously hidden standing wave patterns emerge. The temporal scale of sound interaction, dampening as entropy, reverberation, resonance, and so forth, is shorter than the calendrical scale of human societal action. The time scale of a musical work is heartbeats and breaths rather than earth rotations or moon orbits. So the Shengyi Jing needs methods of testing and designing the flow of change on the meso and micro time scales. Rather than casting yarrow sticks or coins, we'll use sensors and triggers. The pair of hexagrams, Bo and Fu, are the sonic phenomena of fading in and fading out, onset and offset, entropy and syntropy. There's no word for the idea of a continuum between these two forces, thus the neologism. Transtropy sits in the middle, representing the competition between forming and unforming. In a dualistic substance ontology, we choose between to be or not to be. In Chinese philosophy, there's only becoming, transformation, and phases of individuation. When a sound fades away, there's no sound. We continue to listen in the silence and are in a state either of expectation or appreciation. If, as Yahui writes in Art and Cosmotechnics, Qi is an opening to the Tao, then Qi is far from insignificant. Zhu Xi wrote, Tao is Qi, Qi is Tao. To recall the difference is that invisible Tao is above form, Xing Er Shang, while visible Qi is below form or has form, Xing Er Xia. Therefore, the idea of the I Ching as a tool, as Qi, is to make apparent invisible pattern, the invisible patterns of the Tao. This is what Roy Ascott means with technoetics, referring to technologies of consciousness. The I Ching is a technology, Qi, of consciousness to make the Tao manifest. All this comes with a caution. The opening of the Tao Te Ching is vigilant regarding the relationship between names and things. The name that can be named is not the constant name. Thus, names such as Tao, process, or even consciousness are not the constant names. Names are tools. As a polarity, names and things, names, representation, have a tentative relationship to their territory. Speculative ideas are themselves things, tools. Hexagrams and their images are tools. But we ourselves should beware not to become like a thing or a tool. This is what Kongzi means when he says the human is not a utensil. Junzi bu qi. The term xuan stems from the philosophy of the Weijin dynasty, which began Neo-Taoism around 200-400 AD, when Confucianism was integrating more with Taoism and Buddhism. Again, quoting from Yahui, Art and Cosmotechnics, Xuan logic, or Taoist thinking more generally, became the core aesthetic thinking during the Weijin period and continued through millennia to nurture artistic creation. Xuan logic operates through oppositional continuity. The way that oppositions are dissolved by the movement of yin yang is the unique contribution of the Chinese concept of Huanliu. In the celebrated disagreement on the nature of time, if you remember, 1922, between Bergson and Einstein, Bergson was run out of town, meaning the 20th century, science superseded philosophy. Rationalism superseded intuitionism as the authoritative voice in crucial epistemological matters. Interestingly, the same thing at the same time happened in China in a similar cultural debate. Ding Wenjiang, a respected geologist, criticized Zhang Junmai regarding Zhang's article Ren Shengguan, Life View, in which he defends the place of a Chinese traditional theory of knowledge. Ding Wenjiang dubbed Zhang's philosophy as xuanxue, as derogatory and indicating superstitious thinking, like the word mysticism in English. The phrase was later used to discredit intellectuals who embraced the thought of Bergson and Rudolf Eucken. At the beginning of the 20th century, one might say that a more significant divide emerged than that between East and West. That divide was a global shift in consciousness between the relative standing of philosophical and scientific knowledge, a development over centuries that now is the doxy of modernism, and hence becomes a rather pressing matter in terms of globalization. In 2004, at the beginning of the 21st century, I'm afraid that we were, for the most part, going with the flow of accelerationism. Digitize first, ask questions later. I should say I was. I'm not sure that Techne was simply serving our needs. Perhaps we were serving Techne, becoming tool-like ourselves. In our techno-evangelicalism, it's an ongoing discussion that obviously persists today in the guise of AI, but as may now be evident, we can say that this relationship between humans and Techne forms one of the most perennial and productive of these kinds of conceptual polarities. Reframing consciousness, therefore, means reframing our relationship to Techne. I'm not alone in suggesting that further study in Xuan logic is necessary, and a more subtle investigation of Huanliu, or third-order cybernetics. Art, philosophy, science, and engineering stand as a circulatory organism. That is the academy, and it's not whole, balanced, or flowing. Humans as fabricators have been seeding an artificial logos over the course of millennia. There is an aspect of logos that simply functions like a machine and is running as programmed. Tao logic is different in kind from a geometric logic. It's more a sense. For the human, its function is to steer clear, cybernetically speaking, of dead ends, not to homeostatically stay the course, the way. When Norbert Wiener proposes the need to lean more into the human use of human beings, why does he use the word use? Why this language of utility? Was he giving a nod to Confucius with that statement? Or was it his habit, as Western philosophy is wont, to look for some purpose for human beings like a thing or a tool? Chinese philosophy also has this concept of use, yong, which means application, function, practice, or techne. But Lao Tzu talks about yong. It's central to Buddhist and Neo-Taoist thought. It's usually paired with ti, meaning substance or body, the very famous Ti-Yong pair, which was a hugely important idea in 20th century modernizing China, and still is. In fact, I think it will become even more important in the next 20 years. Globally, in the already upon us decades of AI ahead. And there it ends. I'm simply going to leave you all with that thought. Plant the seed, 体用. Let's consider incorporating this little game of 玄学 into our various research programs. So my formulaic finale might read something like this. The way we consider Earth, kun, is the way we consider Ti, or humans. The way we consider the future, 前, is the way we consider Yong, or techne. See you in 2044 for the 40th anniversary of Consciousness Reframed in China. Who's on iPhone? Yes, Mr. iPhone or Miss iPhone.
Thank you, Kenneth.
Who's on iPhone there?
An iPhone?
iPhone is the sixth person.
I don't
That
know.
person who has, is there a way to mute the iPhone? Because it was my audio accompaniment through the whole talk.
I don't know who has an iPhone here on. Yeah, sure. But it's in Chinese, the interface. I have to ask Eleanor for help. It's
You should mute it. It's pretty distracting.
yeah, I can because it's
Here I'm muted. Yeah.
That's better.
thank you. You could not hear the iPhone from here. So
Right.
sorry, you can keep going. Thank you.
That was a cybernetic system.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, got through it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you ending the session here and then joining another session with your talk?
Yeah, after you, I was planning to opening the conference, and since we still now a little 10 minutes before 2, right?
Mm.
I believe we can end the session. Thank you for this wonderful speech and sharing in detail what was the spirit for the 2004 Consciousness Reframed, as beautiful as it could be. And I believe we close the session and we start the new Zoom, so you can keep like each session as a separated video, and then in the future we can share online. Okay,
I'll see you in the next one.
Okay, yeah.
See you in the next life.
Yeah, no, just a sec. Yeah. I cannot read.
Oh, thanks, Kenneth.
Yeah.
They enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. See you next session.